Welcome back, heroes, to some more Custom NPC scripting. Today, we're gonna go over transformations, which I believe will add a lot of interesting variety to people's NPCs, because you can have it go from one to another, and there's all sorts of things you can do with it. So, first thing I wanted to address, my Broly transformation, which I know a lot of you asked about. At this point, I find it to actually be inferior compared to other things that you can do. So I just wanted to briefly describe what I do here, just to kind of show what I used to do, and then I'll get into what I do now. So for this Broly, of course, we have like some values that you that you initialize. So we have like the transform state that he's in, and also his initial texture, and also a lot of his stats. So the idea for this one is essentially as you beat him up, he detects how much damage he's been taking, and then at a certain point, he'll change his transform state, at which point he will set his texture and stats and do all sorts of stuff to transform, which is done during his damage step. So if you look into here, he's got the transform state, that's the damage that he's taking, that's the transform state. And then you have to set the texture. The texture is essentially the biggest portion of this. It's the visual aspect. He sets the texture. I do some thunder strikes. I used to have a world explode, but I think it's like this one. Yeah, spawn particle explode rather than an actual explosion. And then you have to change his stats and all that. Here's the problem. When you set the texture, you can only set the essentially the local texture, which is this here. Which the problem is that everybody requires that texture, and I haven't found a way to set their URL. Thank you, weather. So I haven't found a way to actually set the URL texture or player texture, so it's limited because it means that everybody requires this resource pack to detect any changes. And it's limiting. Plus, you have to set all of his stats. It's not good. Now, one thing I wanted to point out is that if you wanted to do transformations without script, let me show you a quick way to do it, and then I will show you why you'll want to do scripting. So first off, you need to create each individual state of the NPC, which I'll do right now. Boom, there we go. Now, just to save time, here we go. We got all of the individual stages as NPCs. So you need to just set all their stats and whatnot. I believe their respawn does not matter. We'll find out, because we'll test this. This guy has a respawn. All of these guys do not. They do not respawn. So we got all of the individual stages. Now you need to make sure to save them. So I'm going to go ahead and save them onto client side, which I believe is what you need. Client side save, client side save, client side save. Okay, there you go. Now you got all the NPCs and you can get rid of them. Next thing you need to do, you need to create an area where these guys are going to spawn. Now, there's a lot of limitations with this, but this is as far as I can tell how to do it. So let's call this the free spawner for freeze the spawner. And then what you want to do is first off set him to aggressive so that he attacks. Make sure he doesn't need to see anybody, because the whole idea is that as soon as somebody walks by, he'll start spawning. And then you want to set him to a spawner. Here we go. And then we could set each individual stage. Now, like I said, this is how you could do it without scripting, and I find it very important when doing scripting, make sure you don't have to do anything that you don't need to. Essentially, don't create a script if you could already do it, because it's a lot of resources. Dies after spawn, despawn targets after loss, sure, 1 by 1. All will not work for this state. You want 1 by 1. All right, so there we go. We got the dude. We'll plop that here, and just to show how this works, game mode S. Now, forgot the last aspect. Make sure that they spawn. Make sure they spawn at a spot that works. So this will spawn them 5 blocks above the NPC. Here we go. Now we can fight them. Let's just go ahead. I want to whoa. I didn't want to use the Kaioken. I want to use Super Saiyan Blue because it's cool. Look at that, blue hair. All right, so there we go. Now we got the first stage of Frieza. He's coming up and he's beating the crap out of me. And then I got to basically beat him up. And then once he's dead, next one spawns. And you'll note that they pretty much spawn right by the NPC. And so you can just keep fighting them and keep fighting them, and eventually you'll kill the next one. Die! There you go. And then we got the third stage. And we got the fourth stage. So we have an NPC, all the transforms, but here's the limitations. A, you have to kill each individual stage of the NPC in order for this to work. You can't really control any of the effects of the NPCs, and that you have to essentially have an extra NPC which controls their spawn. Okay, would you die, please? Thank you. Now, if you note, let's go ahead and game mode C. It kills, oh, he's supposed to die. I think I didn't set that correctly. Oh yeah, if you set this to yes, then he'll actually die after they've been spawned. We'll go ahead and get rid of him because that's not the way we want to do it. So yeah, that is a way to do transformations if you like. As you note, they will spawn right on the same spot. As wherever the NPC is. You can't really control the transformations, and you have to kill the entire NPC before getting to the next version. So overall, it's very limited, but it is a way that works. So why don't we do a better way with scripting? Okay, so there's going to be several concepts I'm going to need to cover in this, so this episode will probably run a little bit longer than usual. But first and foremost, I want to cover the concept of objects. Now, as I've established before, you can do npc.setTempData or whatever. But the thing is, we're going to need to keep track of a couple different information between each of the NPCs, which means we need to set to the world. Now, we could do each individual thing like the function and the variables. We could do all those individually, but if we create an object, then we don't have to worry about that. So let's go ahead and go var, we'll say FZA for Frieza, and then we do this. So what this does is this means that we are establishing an object. Where this is advantageous is that we could store this object which has all of its variables. So we don't have to do multiple calls of set object. We only have one. We just set the Frieza object. So let's go ahead and establish a few things. So one of the things I want to do with this actual transformation is I want to make it so the initial guy here controls the reset. Now you could just make it so you only there's multiple ways to do it. You can make it so that he doesn't ever respawn, so you could just spawn the first one and then worry about it later. You can make it so the first guy, which is what I'm going to do here, when he dies and spawns the next state, when his normal respawn count happens, it'll reset the whole thing. That way you can have, if you have a server, you can have a 200-second limit for the battle or whatever you would figure would be normal. You could also make it so that the last guy does it, so that means that if somebody comes up and somebody's like, I can't beat the third stage, I give up. Somebody will come by, they could fight the third stage dude and then get to the final stage, and then when the final stage guy respawns, you could do it. There's a lot of ways you could do it. You can also make it just like when you beat the final guy, you have the script spawn in the first guy. That's another way. You could have another NPC do it. It's scripting. There's a lot of ways you can control. So I'm going to make it so that when this guy dies, he will spawn the next one and start his respawn timer. When his respawn timer is up, he will respawn, and when he spawns in, it will delete the rest of whoever is here. As such, as soon as you start the fight, you will have a duration to defeat the fight, at which point this guy will respawn as his initial stage and delete the rest of them. That's what I'm going to go for here. If you want to try different ways, just, you might want to consider experimenting with it. Okay, so first off, in order to have some way to keep track of when to reset, we'll have reset F, so reset Frieza, and then we'll set it to true. So when you declare an object, which I'll get rid of that just to say, when you declare an object, you basically set a parameter type and then its value, its initial value. So right now we are calling a variable reset F and we're setting it to true. So later what I could do is I could go reset F as a value. As you might recall, things like npc.x is kind of the same concept. So NPC itself is an object and X is a parameter. So we're essentially we're creating the parameter reset F We could do this with methods as well. You can do a lot of stuff with objects. And I find that if you can master this, there's a lot of things that you could actually do in terms of information control. So we have reset F as one of the objects, or one of the parameters. Let's see, what else will I need? I need a way to determine when to trigger the actual transformation. So I'm going to do damage. So the way I'm going to do this is when he takes a certain amount of damage, he will transform, but he will carry on how much damage he took. So right now he's taking no damage because it's initialized. And I'm using the first guy. When he initializes, essentially all of this is going to reset. So there you go. Also, I want to have some kind of transformation sequence. Okay, so here's where this becomes a lot more fun. All right, so what we're going to do is, actually, it's not var, it'd be function trans for transform. All right, so what we have here is a function called transform. Now, I could do whatever I want within this function and then call it whenever I want them to transform. And since this is a part of the Frieza object, I could use this amongst all of the other NPCs. By the way, in order for that to happen, I go world.setTempData. Let's call it FZA. So what I'm doing here is I'm creating the Frieza object, and then I'm going to set it in the world, which the world is persistent with every single NPC. So if another NPC calls the Frieza object, it gets all of the elements of the Frieza object, which also could include, let's call it trans, and set it to the trans function. So what I did here is I added to the object the trans function, which means if I want, all I have to do is once set everything I want to have happen in the trans function, and it will, when I call it, all of it will happen. So if another NPC calls it, I don't have to rewrite all that code. They just have access to it. So let's see here. I'm going to want to pass an NPC object. Actually, let's go parameter NPC. Now, normally with, what was it? In C# and whatnot, you would declare what type these parameters are. I don't believe you have to in JavaScript, and I haven't seen any evidence to the contrary. If you happen to know, let me know. But we're going to treat this as the NPC object. The reason for this is because I don't want the current NPC. If I do like, let's see, NPC.x or whatever, this NPC.x is the initial NPC, which is this guy. I don't want that. That's not going to help me all that much. So I want to be able to pass whatever's the current NPC to the function so that I could get their relevant information. Because the reason why I want that to do is because, well, let's go ahead and add the lightning strikes real quick. So as you can see here, when the transform actually happens, when they call transform, it's going to lightning strike around the initial NPC, as opposed, or it's not the initial NPC, the NPC that is doing the transform, as opposed to this guy, which I don't want it his, because essentially what will happen is it will always strike around here. If I'm fighting him and he's over here, I want the lightning strikes to happen on this guy, wherever he's going to be. So that way, when this guy transforms and he calls the function, he passes himself, and then the function will be able to run and strike over there, because I need to know his position, not his. That might be a bit confusing. If you experiment with it, you could see what I mean by essentially replacing this with the normal NPC. You'll see what I mean and why you want to pass the NPC. But essentially, the idea is I don't want this guy. I want whoever's going to be over there, which could be any one of these stages. All right, so there we go. We're going to be passing the NPC object. We want to also pass transform. So what this is going to be, trans, is going to be a string, which is going to be whatever one of these guys I'm going to transform to. Essentially, in order for this to work, we're going to be using the object called spawn clone, which we'll go ahead and add that here. All right, so spawn clone is a part of the world object. So we go world.spawn clone. And then, let's see. So we want a position. We also want the tab value, which is going to be 1. I'm going to store everything in tab 1. You could store, like, it might be a good idea if you have multiple different guys to store, like, have a particular transform tab. I mean, that's pretty much whatever you guys wanted to organize as, but it is important that you do have multiple tabs so you can organize it as such. And then we're going to pass it trans. Now, trans is a string, so whatever I call the object in the cloner, which would be in here, whatever I call these objects, that's what it's going to summon. Now, I have here pretty much what I was experimenting with, and I liked the shorter names, so I'm going to be using those. Don't worry, I have all the scripts, so it's going to override it, but I have all the scripts, so it should be fine. Yeah, essentially you want to pass it the name. So now what we have is a method that will lightning strike around the NPC. It will also spawn a clone on wherever the NPC is. Now I could kill the current clone, but there's not much point in doing that at the moment because, well, there might be instances where I don't want to kill the clone, or it might be instances where it don't have to kill the clone, like when it just dies. It's gonna despawn anyways. There's not much point. All right, I'm gonna also add this spawn particle large explode. This will just make it look like it explodes around the NPC when he spawns. So it's just, it's kind of helpful. Makes it look fancy. It's a world.spawn explode. Pick the NPC's location. There's a lot of stuff. You can look it up in the scripting API if you want to do it. All of these are optional. You can do whatever kind of effect you want. So what I have is a lightning strike the area. It'll spawn a particle that'll explode in that area. So it'll look like it'll explode, and then it'll spawn the desired NPC on the location. Now, what I need to do is I also need to determine whether or not I need to reset all the NPCs. So what I'm going to do is essentially, after the first one dies, I'm going to tell the rest of the NPCs they don't need to die. Because the idea is that when the first NPC spawns, it's going to tell the rest of them that they need to die. So what we're going to do here is reset F. Okay, well, so the reason why I also want to describe this, there might be a better way to do this, but this brings up an important keyword, which is this. Now, what this is think of it as this object. Now, since I attached this function to the Frieza object, this is going to refer to the Frieza object. It's very important because this will also mean different things in different contexts. So this will refer to, if I put this here, it will refer to the current NPC, which I'm not sure if it's going to be like this NPC object. I haven't figured what that is, but since the function is tied to the NPC, I'm pretty sure that this is tied to the current NPC. So think of it as similar to this, likely? I'm not exactly sure. I'll need to experiment with that, but just know if I put this here, it's referring to the Frieza object simply because this function is here. Now, if I were to call trans here and send it this as like the NPC, this NPC, I'm no longer talking about the Frieza object. I'm talking about the NPC, or this like wherever this method is. So think of it at that. This is essentially the object referred to wherever its context is currently. So since trans is in Frieza, this now refers to Frieza, which means I have access to damage and reset F. So what I could do here is I could set the damage equal to, let's say, parameter damage, and then we could add those in a second, and then we go this dot reset F equals parameter reset F. Now let's go. By the way, why I'm calling these P for parameter is because it's better practice to actually have some way to differentiate the two. You can use this as a way of like referring to it because I have this dot damage, so if I pass damage, it would know what's the difference. But I like to change the names of the parameters because it kind of does matter. Okay, so what I have now is I have an object that has what the transform method is going to be. And then I have the object, which is the Frieza object, which is what I'm going to be sharing between all of my NPCs. They contain the transformation method, which is going to do all the thunder strikes and also spawn the NPC and set the current damage value that the NPC is at and the reset. Now, I could put the set temp data in here, but I might not want to have that necessarily happen, but there you go. Now, here's another thing, is that I can make multiple transform methods. So if I want them to do something different between each stage, I can make another function here and add it and then add it to the object here. There's a lot you could do with objects, and I want you guys to understand that this is very important for moving forward and being able to do a lot more things with custom NPCs. So just to review, you create the object, you have to use the curly braces. You, for each variable, you instantiate the name, colon, and then its value. If you want to add multiple parameters, you then separate them by commas. And you could also set functions in here. Now, if I wanted to, I could establish the function here as opposed to putting trans, but I kind of like to separate them because it makes it a lot easier to read, and I can separate it here. Now, memory-wise, it would probably be better to set it here, but, you know, whatever. It's easier to read, and we want readability over functionality at the moment. Overall, you do want to have a lot better functionality, but, you know, it's the argument, what is better in what situation. So yeah, we have the Frieza object, couple parameters with the function that is trans here, and then we set temp data Frieza. So now, whenever he initializes, he creates this object. It might be better to have another NPC do that. Oh, come on, I hate how this works. You gotta add a couple enters after this just so it sets it right. All right, so there we go. We have an NPC, we have the method, we have everything that it's going to be set. Now we're going to, in the next episode, show you how to use this to actually transition from one NPC state to the other. I hope you guys got like enough out of this episode if you want to like experiment with certain transformations, like the method I had here, or if you can figure out how to do other ways with the set texture. I would recommend it. As I stated before, you can't change the URL texture, so it does have its limitations. Also, you can't change the model, so like I'm using all the Frieza objects here. You couldn't set the model as far as I figured. You might be able to, but I haven't found a way to do that yet. So this allows you to freely do whatever you want with the NPC and switch between them. So in the next episode, I will actually show you guys how you will transition between each state and also why a lot of the initial setup is important. So join me next time as we continue with more custom NPC scripting in Transformation Part 2. But anyways, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed, and we'll see you all next time. Take care and goodbye.